Good evening. How's everybody doing? No. How's everybody doing? That's better. Now we're talking. Now we can start the show. Anyway, welcome to the 60-second Honors Colloquium, Education Behind the Curtains. This week featuring Dr. Richard Culatta. A few housekeeping details before we start. There are exits in the back. There are exits on both sides of the stage. I, by the way, am Carl Asplund, the Associate Director of the Honors Program. Thank you. The bathrooms are out front, and please refrain from photos or video recording tonight, and I will very soon ask you to silence your phones and put them away, but the students have to do one thing with their phones before we do, so hold that thought. If you do need to leave during the event, please close that back door quietly and refrain from speaking till you're out of the building. There's a dint of acoustics in here where everything that is said back there can be heard up here on stage. That's how it works. However, I would now like to turn to the land acknowledgement, and I would like to welcome Ridge Burrell, a URI senior in economics, to join me on the stage, please. Ridge, would you come up? And I am delighted to be a part of this every time I do. The University of Rhode Island occupies the traditional stomping ground of the Narragansett Nation and the Niantic people. We honor and respect the enduring and continuing relationship between the Indigenous people and this land by teaching and learning more about their history and present-day communities, and by becoming stewards of the land that we too inhabit. Ridge, please.
Oscawi Kwasin, Wanikisak ni Tampawag, Natasuis Ridge Burrell, Kani na Anahagansit. Now I said to you all in the native tongue of this land, hello, good day friends. My name is Ridge Burrell, and I come from the people of the Small Points, also known as the Keepers of the Bay, known to many of you as the Narragansett Indian Nation. And essentially I've come here today to say to you all, Colloquium, welcome, and Kataba Unamu, thank you all.
Thank you, Rich. Now, this colloquium represents and celebrates what honors does best, namely, examine the major issues of our time at timely moments, and what could be more timely right now than a look behind the curtains at education in our nation. We are thrilled to promote the partner events that you see appearing here on these slides behind me. And I would like to have you note that producing a series of this scope requires 1 or 2 years of planning and many campus partners. I would like to deliver thanks, especially to the colloquium coordinators, Lazaro Camacho Jr. and Daniel Kelly from the College of Education. I would like to, yes, ask you to give them a little applause. I would like to thank the sponsors of this year's program, who you can see listed on the program. And a special thanks to President Parlange and his office, and the President is here tonight. Thank you for being here tonight, sir. And to our Provost Wolf and her office, both of whom are sustaining sponsors of our URI Honors Colloquium. So thank you to all of the above. Now, if you're enjoying the colloquium, and I see many familiar faces who are here week to week, please consider supporting the URI Honors Program, as many of you have done, and your gifts keep us alive, they keep the conversations like this one thriving, and they support a number of student activities. Now, I would like you to join us next week to hear Eric Felix speak to us on In These Times, Racial Justice, Resistance, and Reimagination in Community Colleges. But before we begin tonight's program, we'd like students in the colloquium course to take out their phones. And please, once I get this to actually behave itself, there we go. This is how you check in, dear students. Take out your phones and please complete this attendance link. Just scan the QR code, fill out the Google form, and you're checked in for this evening's session. Then put away your phones. And that goes for all of you, by the way. We want those phones down. But now to introduce tonight's speaker, please welcome Mark Hutchison, Professor of Political Science and Director of the John Hazen White Senior Center for Ethics and Public Service. That center has co-sponsored tonight's event along with the Political Science Department. So Mark, please take the stage. Thank you all. Enjoy the talk.
Thank you. All right, now how do I do? Perfect. Oh, well, thank you. I have my concession to age here with my glasses. So I'm here tonight representing the John Hazen White Center for Ethics and Public Service. We have long time sponsored an honors colloquium speaker that will talk about things related to ethics and public service. And tonight's speaker is no different. I'm looking very much forward to hearing about the insights, particularly with the ethical questions that AI oftentimes brings up. But I want to talk a little bit before introducing the speaker, a little bit about the center, because right now we're celebrating our 30th anniversary of the center here on campus. Each year, the Center of Ethics and Public Service sponsors several signature initiatives, including events like tonight, as well as student internships, learning, and ethics training across the community. The mission of the center is to facilitate the URI community conversations regarding the practice of ethics and to foster engagement in public service throughout Rhode Island. This year, we are celebrating our 30th anniversary by hosting the Rhode Island premiere of the film Silence on the Streets on Thursday, November 6th, right here. This film chronicles the opioid epidemic in New England, specifically in Connecticut, in Hartford, and the journey of addiction and recovery. This event will feature a panel discussion prior to the film with the film director, Charisse Hellam Hanna, as well as other experts and practitioners in the field. I hope you can join us. Doors will open at 4:30, and we'll have food and refreshments. Like I said, today's topic is so timely for the issues that we're concerned about at the center. So tonight, we are thrilled to welcome back to URI, familiar face URI, Richard Culatta, one of the nation's leading voices in education, innovation, and technology. Richard currently serves as the CEO of ISTE and ASCD, two of the most influential organizations shaping the future of teaching and learning. Before leading ISTE, Richard directed the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Educational Technology during the Obama administration, where he helped launch national initiatives to bring digital learning to millions of students. He also served as Rhode Island's first Chief Innovation Officer, pioneering creative solutions to make government more responsive, connected, and human-centered. Now, as many of us know, particularly as me, as a faculty here on campus, conversations about AI often dominates faculty meetings and other conversations with both amongst faculty and students, and really throughout the community. So these conversations about AI often focus on fear, on the negatives, on cheating, on shortcuts, on erosion of critical thinking. But tonight, that's why I'm looking forward to this, I'm going to encourage all of us to kind of lean in a different direction, to look at it through a different lens, to imagine how these tools might enhance human connection, deepen our learning, expand possibility to be used thoughtfully and ethically. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage Richard Culatta.
Okay. First thing I have to do is set a timer because I get really excited about this. I could just be here all night talking about this. Is like a wind me up and watch me go subject, so I'm going to spare all of you from that and make sure I get a timer started. I also need to do something here, they've told me, to make sure this works. And we'll see if that does its magic. That's my presentation, isn't that creative? We're going to do it a little differently here. There we go. Hang on now. Hey, that's a little better. All right, thank you. Glad to be here. Can I actually ask a favor? Can I have house lights up a little bit? Because I want to be able, I'm gonna talk with you a little bit here, and I want to be able to see your faces. So if we can do that, that'd be fantastic. Thank you thanks for spending some time here with me. I'm incredibly honored to be back here at URI. This is a place that's very special for me, not because I was a student here, although it was, but also because I literally grew up here on campus. My house was just down the road on Bayberry Road, and I just thought everybody growing up had this like giant playground in their backyard with a bunch of students and great places to ride your bike around. And so it was great to be here. My mom was on the faculty at the School of Education for many years. My other claim to fame is that I made the first website for Kingston Pizza. So if you are, that's actually what it looked like. So if the first thing didn't get you credibility, the fact that I helped make the first Kingston Pizza website maybe did a little bit. My current role, as you heard, is I run these two organizations that have come together. ISTE is the International Society for Technology and Education, and then ASCD is the organization that really leads school leaders. It's the School Instructional Leader Association. We just brought them together because we thought in this world that we're in, having one group that talks about technology and the future of learning and a separate group that talks about instruction and what students should be learning as two separate communities wasn't helping anybody. And so we've brought them together, and our focus here is helping to design the future of learning. That's what we do. We work in 93 countries around the world and every state in the US on how we can help design the future of learning. Now, designing the future of learning is hard. In part because we don't know what the future looks like, believe it or not. When I worked for the Department of Education, I walked in one day, I walked into my office, and somebody had put this painting on the back, behind my desk on the wall. I still don't know who it was. It had a little note on it, and they had hung this up, and I thought, what is this weird painting that somebody has put in my office? And so I did some research on it. So Jean-Marc Coté actually is a really interesting artist. He was doing his art in the 1900s, and he decided to do a whole series of pieces of what different parts of the world would look like, what life would look like 100 years into the future. So he had some on shopping and some on like vacation. This was his painting on what school would look like in the year 2000. And I thought it was fascinating, especially if you think about COVID. I'm like, he nailed it. If that had just said Zoom there instead of like a book grinder, like that was COVID learning. It's interesting how right he got it, right? And it just reminds us how difficult it is to try to predict the future. I tried to do it, but I used AI to do my prediction. So here's my prediction. I asked Microsoft Copilot what school would look like in 100 years, and here's what we got, in case you're wondering. Don't worry, students are still sitting at desks, and they still have backpacks. So all is good, even in the future. Although there's some cool 3D stuff going on there a little bit. What I want to talk about today is the changing relationship between us humans and technology. Our relationship is changing, and it's changing in some really interesting ways. I was at an event the other day. We host these events, and I was talking to somebody, and I said, hey, this is really interesting. I'd like to stay in touch with you. Could you give me your contact information? She went like that. And at first I was like, is this like a thank you, like a weird way to shake hands? And I noticed she had a QR code tattooed into her arm. And I just sort of held my phone over, and up popped her information, and I was able to get in touch with her. I just really hope whatever service she used to get the QR code generated didn't doesn't time out in a year or whatever happens. That would be a little awkward. but anyway, that was what, I'm not suggesting we do this, to be clear, one way that technology is changing. I think about, as I had a chance to meet with some of the honor students earlier today, thinking about the world that we are preparing them for as they leave URI. And there's a lot that we don't know about that future world, but one thing that we absolutely know is every single one of the students, when they graduate from this institution, are going to walk into a world where they will be working on teams where not all members of their team are human. We absolutely know that. In fact, I was in China the other day. We do some work in China, and I was talking to somebody, I made that comment, and the person I was talking to said, yeah, it's not that bad. I said, what? She said, yeah, my boss, I report directly to an AI. It's two levels up before we get to a human, but my direct boss is AI. And we talked about the relationship of having AI as a boss. I don't know that will be necessarily the way that it will look. I think it will much more likely feel like co-working arrangements. We absolutely know that will be the case. And so I think we need to be thinking about how are we preparing students for that world. Before I go on, I want to pause for a second and say that I am what I would call a digital humanist. So a digital humanist is somebody who believes in the importance and inherent worth of humans, and who believes that in order to be really our best human selves, we need to use technology to help us do human better. That's what a digital humanist is. And there are some tools that we have that have enormous potential. These tools are also tools that have potential to do enormous destruction, right? And so we just have to be very clear and recognize that how we choose to use the tools that we've been given can either create a lot of problems or actually solve some of the biggest, most challenging problems we've ever faced as a human race. I also want to mention, some of you may not know this is Digital Citizenship Week. Does anybody other than me in this room know that this is Digital Citizenship Week? Awesome, look at all the hands. That's great. I didn't expect that you would. I would actually have been pretty surprised if somebody did. This is Digital Citizenship Week. In the K-12 school world, more hands would have gone up. This is a week dedicated to pausing and thinking about what are the skills that we need to be learning and practicing in order to be good members of our digital world. And so I think this topic actually is very aligned to what we were talking about. So I was a teacher. I used to teach Spanish, and then I used to teach pre-service teachers, and I love giving tests. That's why I went into teaching, as anybody does, because they like to test kids. So we're going to do a test. Do you remember these? By the way, the matching, right? Weren't those were so fun. I love those. It was right about that point where we stopped having those that school became less interesting for me. I thought that was really good. So this is not the test, by the way. I'm just showing you what's coming. Okay. So we're going to do a test here, a pre-test. And what I'd like you to do is, if you're one of the students in the room, I want you to answer it for yourself. If you're one of our former students, somebody who's no longer a student, I want you to answer it as how you think the students here on campus might answer it, or if there are students in your lives that you know how they might answer it. So here we go. The question is, what is the most relevant line to draw between that device and the options above? So A is essentially a video player, right? It's a movie player. B is a tool that can help build and fix things. C is a gaming machine, right? And then D is a device that helps you see things more clearly, that you couldn't see things at a distance, see things that you couldn't see just with your eye. What do you think? What would be the answer that most would choose? Just yell out some answers. What do you think? How many say A? Right? Some A's. Okay. How many say B? Good. Thank you. Right? C? Some C's. Yeah, okay. All right. I probably might. No, I wouldn't answer that. Okay. D? How many say D? Okay. So we have a little bit of a mix here. This is an interesting question because the answer, of course, is it depends. It depends on how we are modeling and practicing the use of these devices. These devices, of course, do all those things, but which one does it primarily do, I think depends on us and how we think about the role of technology in our lives. By the way, I got a little obsessed with this question about how do we think about the role of technology in our lives, how do we help younger people, how do we create conditions for them to practice using technology in useful ways, and I wrote a book about it. Here's my shameless plug for my book, Digital for Good. If you want to learn more about how to create healthy conditions for people to use technology, check that out. There's also a few copies in the back that we have for people. But I mention this because there are two important skills that I talk about in the book. I talk about a bunch of stuff in the book. I give a bunch of prompts for having conversations around technology use, but there's two skills that I want to talk about today. The first is becoming a digital citizen, a good member of our digital world, requires practice. It is a complex skill. Think of other complex skills. Think of skills like learning a language, learning a sport. That's my son Benjamin playing the piano. He's a good pianist, right? That's a complex skill. Being an artist, right? Anytime you have a complex skill, it requires practice. Being a good digital citizen requires practice. The challenge is we don't often give opportunities to practice the skills that we want to see. I love visiting schools. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love visiting schools. And so I go to schools, but I'm also kind of nerdy. And so when I go to schools, I ask them when I show up, hey, can I see a copy of your internet use policy, right? Or your digital use guide, or whatever they call it, right? Can I see it? Because that, brings me joy, right? How many people have not received joy from getting a digital use agreement from a school, right? I know you have. So, and I've started collecting them, you guys. I have this collection of these. I'm not going to show you all of them, but here's one that I like. This is a school I visited the other day. 36 things, 36 don'ts, 36 things not to do with technology, right? Don't share your password, and don't be a jerk, and don't hack our system, and don't play games, and don't let your brain turn to mush. And I don't even know. If you gave me $100, I couldn't come up with 36 things to not do with technology. But they did, and that's a little disconcerting. But what's really disconcerting is there isn't a single do. There isn't a single invitation. There isn't anything? Could we have 37 and use it to learn, right? Or 38, be curious. 39, fact check. I don't know, something, nothing. Really? And so this is the tone that we are using in schools when we talk about technology. No wonder we're having some of the dysfunction that we're having, right? If all we're listing is all the do's, and remember, you can't practice not doing something, so there's nothing there that we can practice. Remember this picture of my kid Benjamin back here? Wait, where is it? There? Right, imagine if he came into his piano lesson and his teacher sat down and said, Benjamin, we are going to now talk about all the wrong notes not to play. Don't play that wrong note, and that one's a wrong note. Don't play. We're just going to super go over this. These are all the wrong notes not to play. Got it? Okay. Next week he comes back. Now we are going to go over again all of the wrong notes not to play. We could do this week after week after week, and guess what he would never learn to do? Play the piano. At some point, he has to actually practice doing the thing. He has to practice playing the right notes instead of just being told all the wrong notes not to play, right? Okay. I have a bunch more of these, by the way. Here's another fun one. I will only show you one more, I promise. Here's one. Literally, they were handing this to third graders. If you violate any of the provisions outlined in this policy, your access will be terminated and may constitute a criminal offense resulting in legal action. Dang! I was talking to one of the people. I was like, are you going to sue the third grader? Like, what was your point behind this? What was your, anyway, here would be something better, right? Something like this is what I would love to see. You can do this in families as well. It doesn't just have to be in school. When should you use your devices, right? When a teacher asks you to. What should you do with them? Fact check the information you hear. How about that? Let's practice doing that. Be curious about the new topics that you want to learn, right? Who should you interact with? What happens when something goes wrong? Wouldn't that be a good thing to practice? Right? If something goes wrong, and it's going to go wrong, it always goes wrong. It goes wrong with us adults. Imagine with kids something goes wrong, and they see something that looks like this. What is the one thing we can guarantee they're not going to ever do? Tell anybody. Talk to any adult. Guaranteed. That's the one thing that's guarantees. Over here we say, hey, when something goes wrong, talk to a trusted adult. We're going to help you make it right. I actually want something to go wrong, something minor to go wrong, so we can practice how to resolve it before any major issues ever happen, right? That's the tone that we want to create. There's lots of ways that we can practice this. I love, in the book I talk about a lot of these things, using these devices. These are such great curiosity machines that we have. We love these citizen science apps, if you've ever played with these. It's so great. Don't ever let a bug walk by again. Don't ever let a bug walk by if you're around a kid and not check and see what type of bug it is and what you can learn about it. We've learned all kinds of things just by being able to look at it. Be curious. I'll tell a quick story. This is my other son, Eli, and he got to a point where he was no longer, we couldn't do story time anymore with him because he's reading far more than I ever read, and it has surpassed my reading level. And so we said, well, let's do this thing. So we have a shared notepad on our devices, right? We have a shared note like you guys do. And anytime we go throughout the day, when we have a question about something, we put it down on the notepad, right? And then at the end of the day, we take 10 minutes before he goes to sleep, and we do what we call rabbit holing. So rabbit holing is we say 10 minutes, we're going to go as deep as we can on that one question that we've selected for the day. Okay? So because I know you're wondering now, I'm going to look at, and I have not looked to see what he's added today, so this could be interesting. Let me read you some of the questions that we have on the list to do. Here we go. What's the history of sushi? Let's see. How could you, what would it take to get the Eiffel Tower from France to your backyard? I thought that was an interesting one. Why is time based on 60 and not 100? Right? When were lowercase letters invented? Interesting. Tell me some of you haven't asked these questions, right? Okay. What is salmonella? Where do your taxes go? Right? Like, these are just some of the questions that we've asked. I have no answer for the last one. I'm sorry. I don't know about that. We just don't know. Sorry, kid. Don't know. But these are, so what we do is we dive deep into these for 10 minutes. What we're teaching here is that this device is a device that's used to answer your questions and help you be more curious about the world around you. That's what it's a nice bonding moment for him and me, but we're modeling that this is a device to help you be a curious learner. Okay, second lesson from the book, and then we're going to shift to talking about AI. Screen value is far more important than screen time. The number one question I get, and I speak to parents, I speak to groups all over places, my kid is blank years old, how much screen time should he have, right? Something like that, or she have. The answer is, screen time, actually, while well-intended, is not a very helpful concept for any of us, and here's why. Here are some different activities that I've put up here. Learning a language, making a video, playing Candy Crush, talking with somebody, maybe a family member, reading. These are all activities that are happening on a screen. Fair? Okay. Would you agree with me that different activities here have different value in terms of the value they add to our lives? Could we agree with that? We can debate over which had more value or less, and it probably depends on the kid, and it probably depends on the context, right? If I'm in a car for a long ride, maybe some of these would have more value than others, but the point is that these have different value, and so when I talk about screen time, the message that I'm sending is that every activity that happens on this device has the same value, and nothing could be farther from the truth. That is exactly the opposite message that we want to send. We want to talk about what activities are worth their time, and some activities that could be many, many hours. And some activities, 5 minutes is probably too much. Candy Crush, sorry for those of you who, that hits a little close to home, I realize. Imagine, sometimes I compare this to food time. Could you imagine if we had food time? Right, so food time. So we say, we're going, between 6 and 7 is food time. So you can eat all you want, whatever you want, it doesn't matter, just as long as you're done eating at 7 o'clock. You could shovel Twinkies in your face for an hour, but if you're done at 7, you are good, and we have balance in our lives, right? Would we ever do that? Hopefully not. Does it mean we can't ever eat a Twinkie? No, well, maybe. Twinkie, I probably should have used a better example. Let's say a piece of cake. We probably should never eat a Twinkie. But a piece of cake, right? Like, can we eat some? Of course we can. But we eat it after we've had some healthy food, some vegetables, right, as we've done it. We have balance. It's not about how much time we eat. It's about the quality of what we are eating. And by the way, one more thing. Do you imagine if the way we knew when to stop eating was when the timer went off? Right, I'll just keep eating. Hopefully, goodness, imagine if the timer didn't go off one day and I just kept eating and eating and eating for the next 4 hours till my mom came home and said, oh my gosh, you're still eating beyond your hour of food time. That would be a terrible idea. When do we know when we're done eating? We feel full, right? Shouldn't that be the same thing? Shouldn't we recognize when we've had enough of a digital activity and know that it's time to move on to another activity? That's the same way we need to think about screen time. Okay, close parentheses on that, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because I think it's important to recognize there's a lot of dysfunction that we have around technology use, but so much of it is because we are not doing a good job of setting the right conditions. And if we can set healthy conditions, the way we think about using technology, especially for young people, really improves. Okay? So in honor of Digital Citizenship Week, there you go. Again, if you want to know more, you can check out the book. For the next little bit here, I want to talk about AI specifically. This is a conversation that we bring up a lot, and I'm hearing some really interesting things about AI. And interesting is, there's some interesting debate here, and I want to share, hopefully it will be a little bit of a different viewpoint on some things related to AI. AI is really interesting. Any of you who haven't heard of AI, which I know is nobody, but just thought I'd say that. There's some interesting things you can do with it. Here's some things I've done with it recently. You can write code, tell a joke. This one it's not bad. Because I know you want to know. It says, here's a joke for you. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Oh, come on, it was better than that. Okay, whatever. Give me an excuse, right? I can generate an excuse. Here's an interesting one. They're using AI to detect endangered species and actually help stop the elimination of species that are endangered. Turns out AI does a much better job of tracking and identifying animals than the old way, which was a guy standing in the field asking their names as they went by. AI is much better at that. On the workplace, I do some work with OSHA. The workplace, it can identify right away if somebody's walking in and is not protected for the job that they're going to do to help keep people safe. In China, AI has identified and helped return over 4,000 missing or abducted children based on Face ID. Here's an interesting one. This is a company that will take your ancestors and create an AI entity of them so that you can continue to talk to them after they've died, or your grandkids or great-grandkids can get dating advice from great-great-grandma or whatever, right? Which I don't know. I see some horrified faces out there. I don't know if this one is cool or creepy, right? Like, let's be honest. But I was talking about this once, and I was like, we're like, whoa, that is weird. And then somebody said, how do you think the first people thought when we were taking pictures of people who had died and putting pictures up in our house and like, oh, that's weird. They're like not here, but there's like a picture of them, right? Or how many of you have an audio recording of somebody who has passed away that you still listen to occasionally, right? Right? So wait a minute. So now all of a sudden we're like, well, that's super weird. And then we're like, oh, is it really that different? I don't know. I'm not. Just an interesting thing to think about. We have things that we do now that we're comfortable with of maintaining the presence of people who have passed on. Maybe this is something that we'll be comfortable with down the road. I think about it, and it initially creeps me out, but then I'm like, I could tell dad jokes to unlimited generations of my posterity. Like, that's hard to pass up. Anyway, here's one. This one's really important. Just in case you're wondering about the usefulness of AI, please know that Waldo will never be lost again. This is real. I'm not making this up. You can take any Where's Waldo book and put it under this AI tool, and that little hand, that little plastic hand, will, in 3 seconds, will drop down and point to where Waldo is. So, yeah, I think we're good, right? Like, I think we could probably end there. Unfortunately, even with all the interesting things that AI can do, when I come to education environments, the number one question that I get is, how do we stop cheating? I say, well, use an AI detector, right? So if you think AI detectors work, this will be a moment where I'm going to burst your bubble. I'm just letting you know in advance. The reason AI detectors don't work is because there's nothing to detect, right? AI doesn't like leave an extra space every third word, or like, put an extra comma after, like there's no code, and there's nothing to detect. Right, so AI detectors don't work. People still sell them, so don't buy them, right? They do. There was a school in Texas, this was an interesting one, where a professor failed his whole English class because they were using AI, according to him, to create their writing. And so this whole group of students was on academic probation, till one of them thought to pull the professor's dissertation from 20 years ago and run it through the same AI detector. It turned out it was also written by AI. So that helped clarify things a little bit. But cheating is an interesting topic, and I want to bring this up. We're talking about ethics, and that's one of the key points of tonight's conversation. So I want to talk about this. My good friend at Stanford University has been studying cheating for a long time. Turns out 70% of U.S. students, high school and college students, admit to cheating. So if you're concerned that we have a problem with cheating, you may be right. Here's the interesting thing. I want you to see what happens from before and after the availability of AI tools. You ready? No change. Zero. There is no change in the rate of cheating from before and after the availability of AI tools. So the takeaways from this are, if you think we have a cheating problem in the US, you're right. If you think AI was the cause of it, or removing AI will be the solution for it, you're wrong. And so we need to think about cheating in some very different ways. By the way, I really do love that we suddenly care about this, right? I'm like great, this has been this way for years. Like, now that we suddenly care about cheating, cool, let's do something about it. There's lots of things we can do about it. That's not my topic for tonight. If you want to know more about it, search Richard Culatta cheating, and you'll get a whole bunch of stuff that I've written about how do you stop cheating. And there's lots of great ways to do it. Number one way, by the way, is to make the learning feel more relevant to students. That's the number one way to reduce cheating instances on campus. But giving access to or removing access from AI actually makes really almost no change, no significant difference. And so we need to be thinking a little bit different about some of these questions. So here we go. Here's the real question for tonight. How can we use AI to help us become better at being human? The first thing that we have to recognize is that human cognition has its limits. That's hard for us to do when we've been the only game in town for a while, right? It's hard for us to recognize that. So here's an activity that I use sometimes with people that I'm working with, my dump truck and sports car, right? So two vehicles, and if I said which was better, it'd be hard to answer, right? It sort of depends. It depends on what you want to do with it. If I'm trying to drive from here back to my home in Virginia, comfortably and efficiently, the sports car is probably the better option, right? If I'm trying to haul a bunch of rocks from one part of town to the other, the dump truck's probably the better option. So we have to recognize that the sports car isn't going to do everything, even though it does some things very well, far better than the dump truck, and vice versa, right? One of the things that strikes me is that we haven't spent enough time thinking about what humans are uniquely good at. Yeah? So let's pretend for a second. Let's say dump truck's artificial intelligence, the sports car is human cognition, right? So I want to ask you this question before I go any further. What is a uniquely human skill? And I actually want to have you think about this, because I'm shocked, I'm a little surprised at how few people have spent time thinking about what are uniquely human skills. So I'm going to make you talk, but just for a minute, I promise. Literally, it won't be more than a minute, maybe 45 seconds, all right? Turn to the person next to you, meet a new friend, and I want you to list as many as you can, 3 or 4 or 5, you can list more than that, uniquely human skills. Skills responsibilities that should not be handed off ever to AI. Ready? Go. Okay, 5 more seconds. All right, let me pause you there. I told you I was going to give you 60 seconds, then I give you 30 seconds, so sorry. So what were some of the things that you talked about? Just shout out some. What were some of the things you said? Yeah. Somebody over here. Love. Yes, empathy. Thank you. Glad to hear that one. What else? What are some others? Someone over here. Dexterity. That's an interesting one. Thank you. What? Counseling. Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Others? Sense of mortality. There's an interesting one. Yep, all in the back. Say it one more time, all in the back. Artistic creation with intent. That's interesting. That one we could debate, but that's a really interesting one. Thank you for sharing that one. What else? Others? What's others? None. What? None? Say more. You got to say a little more on that. I think you're right. This is why that question that you posed was so interesting. I think eventually computers will be able to do everything, and so the question isn't what can they do, it's what should be uniquely human skills, right? That's really interesting. So these are all great. These are all great examples. I heard some of these earlier today when I was talking with the students. I also asked this question a lot. Here are some of the answers that I get sometimes, right? Discernment, mindfulness, curiosity, creativity, many more, and all the things that you said, right? These are uniquely human skills. They're things that the AI probably could do, but we are deciding, or could debate whether we decide that we want these to be uniquely human skills. So the next question then, of course, is what are uniquely artificial intelligence skills? Right? I'm going to pose some of these just for time. I'm going to just share some of my thinking here, right? Translation, synthesizing information, predicting patterns, generating options, data processing, media creation. These are things that AI arguably does better than humans. AI drives far better than humans, right? We know at this point, there's absolutely no question AI drives better than humans. Interesting. So should we still drive? I don't know. Some other ones, synthesizing information, far better than humans. Brainstorming is a really interesting one. If we talk about, I have it there as generating options, right? Generating options. AI is far, far better at generating options, more options than humans. I don't know if they're good options, right? We'll talk about that in a second. But if we just start talking about generating lots of options, AI is actually very good at that. And so this is this sort of world that we're in of recognizing that we have human cognition and we have artificial intelligence. That takes some humility. It takes some humility to recognize that we actually can't do everything as well as AI. And sometimes we have to recognize when we're loading up rocks in the sports car, there's stuff that we should do with this human brain that AI should never do. But really, there's stuff that we just have to, our brain was never good at. That's okay. We did it because we were the only game in town, but not because we are inherently good at it at humans. So I believe, as we think about what is the role of school, my friend Ted Dintersmith said, right now our obsolete education model is training kids to be slow, imperfect versions of AI. Right? Think about that for a second. I believe the most important thing that we can be teaching students in school is when it would be irresponsible to hand an important task, a uniquely human task, off to AI. And when it would be irresponsible not to. When the decision-making ability of AI is far better than the humans. When it would be irresponsible to hold on to that when we know AI can do it better. That, I believe, is the most important, certainly one of them, maybe the most important skill that students should walk off this campus with when they graduate. Now, I mentioned before I'm a digital humanist, which means I like that intersection between those two. That's where things get really fun. Right? I purposely started by asking you to say, what does AI do better? What does humans do better? But where it's really fun is this overlapping part. Things where a human skill, where humans get better when they use AI in powerful ways. There are a whole bunch of these that we could come up with, far more than I have time to talk about today. I created what I call Profile of an AI-Ready Graduate. These are 6 elements that I think all students should have to be able to demonstrate before they can graduate from college. And I'll give a few examples of these. These are human skills. These are these special skills that fall into this place. They're human skills, right? These are all human skills that need AI in order to help us do them as well as we should be expected to as humans, okay? So let me share a couple examples here. Oops, let's go back. I'm gonna go here. So we'll start with learner. We actually talked about this one with the honors students today. We know that to be a learner of any age, I'm purposely not saying student, to be a learner, we need far more feedback than we currently get. We need way more feedback than we get. A really effective learning moment is 10 or more times the amount of feedback than we get in a traditional education experience. Turns out, AI is really quite good at giving feedback, right? Here are some things that I have done. How could I have written this code more effectively? These are actual questions that I've asked. How could I make this paragraph more persuasive? I'm writing something and I'm wondering how I can give me some feedback on that. What are the flaws in my argument? I love asking this one. If somebody were to disagree with me, what would be the reason that they would disagree with this argument, right? Helps me get feedback to inform my thinking. One of the examples of how we can use. Here's another one. In order to thrive in the future world that we are walking into, we need to know how to use AI to help us get unstuck. There's a huge amount of time that as learners we spend just being stuck, not understanding what to do next, not understanding the instructions, not understanding a small piece that is keeping us from moving forward. We just sit in stuckness. And we need to know how to use AI. It will be required to use AI, to know how to use AI, to get unstuck in the future jobs that we are walking into. Here's an example that I think is interesting. This is an example of a young student who was struggling to write. It was a teacher that I was talking to, really struggling to write. That blank page was just deadly, right? Just couldn't overcome that blank page. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to write, we're going to have AI write the first sentence, then you're going to write the second sentence. So the AI is the sentence that's not in bold, the bold is his sentence. And then we're going to have AI write the sentence after that. And then AI is going to take a turn, and we're going to go back and forth until you have become comfortable writing. This took a kid who was stuck, who didn't know how to move forward, and made them a very prolific writer. Now, at some point, do we agree that maybe we need to start pulling out? Maybe A writes every third sentence, and then maybe just the beginning and the end, and we gradually move it? Of course. But this is a way to help students get unstuck. Now, at some point, when I say this, somebody goes, wait a minute, but isn't education supposed to be hard? Isn't there supposed to be some struggle along the way? Yes, there is. But here's where I get to introduce the idea of productive struggle and unproductive struggle, right? We do need to struggle with concepts in order to learn them. That is absolutely true. The problem is that if you follow a student through their day, most of the struggle is not productive struggle. It is unproductive. It's waiting to ask a question. It's waiting on a line. It's waiting to get access to something. That is not, none of that struggle helps somebody learn. So here are some examples, and we can come up with many more. Productive struggle is designing an experiment to test out a hypothesis, right? Unproductive struggle is memorizing state capitals. There's no value that comes from that struggle of trying to memorize that, right? Reconciling conflicting sources. I have a source that says one thing, I have a source that says something else. These are two different opinions. How do I reconcile them? That is productive struggle. Formatting bibliographies, unproductive struggle. No value in that. Mathematical reasoning. This is a really interesting one. Right? Understanding deep concepts. Doing long division for hours on end. Not productive struggle. Now, we might say that it's important to at least show that we know how to do long division. I agree with that. But being able to spend hours and hours doing out these long things, that is not productive struggle. We can talk through the other ones. By the way, this is an interesting moment. I was working with a group of educators, and we were talking about these things here. It's before I had not put up that example, and we were talking about this. And I was talking with some English teachers who were losing their minds over AI. They were just losing their minds. They were like hyperventilating. We were getting out the defibrillator and like helping them revive themselves. And then over here, there's some people that were kind of laughing a little bit. They were just kind of joking. It was getting a little distracting. And so I just said, hang on a second. I was like, hey, sorry, is there something funny, right? And they said, sorry, we didn't mean to be rude. We're math teachers. I said, okay, are you like jerks in meetings? Like, like what's the, and no, it's just that we think this is funny because we've been here before. I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, calculators. They said, and the guy that was talking to said turned to his colleagues and he said, how many of you require a calculator in your class? This was high school. Every one of them raised their hands. Everyone require a calculator. He said, it was interesting, he went on to say, it was interesting because when we first started getting calculators, we were freaking out like the English teachers. We were like, this is going to ruin everything. It's going to ruin that. Nobody will know math ever again, right? And then they learned very quickly that once you learn and see that, you know how to subtract, you know how to divide, we can actually get into far deeper mathematical concepts if we're not spending the whole class doing all this long division, right? And then they learned that actually it's really required. There's no math class that's not going to require a calculator. Once you have these basic skills down, they're like, the English teachers will figure it out. We just think it's kind of funny watching them go through it, right? So that was just part of it. So this idea of productive versus unproductive struggle, I think, is really critical. I'm just going to share a couple more just for time. We won't share all of these. Here's an interesting one. Being a storyteller. I think it is a uniquely human skill to be able to tell stories. Stories about our past, stories about ideas that matter to us. And unfortunately, our storytelling ability as humans is limited by our ability to use media to help tell the story. So I'm going to share a couple interesting examples of this. Here's one that I found. This is an educator friend who did this. Here you go.
All right, guys, we are headed to Troy right now. We've been trying for 10 years and we still can't get in. I'll let you guys know if anything happens. All right, quick update. The Trojans seriously locked it down. We're going to regroup, figure something out. I'm going to see if there's another way we can get in.
So I've been thinking it through. I was thinking if
I
we
love he's
hide
eating a
something and
sandwich.
tell them it's a gift, they'll let us in. The only thing I have to figure out is what that something is.
All right, little sneak peek. Look at this beast. The guys have been at it all night, putting in work. I think it's going to turn out real nice. Right, boys?
Anyway, we'll let you, if you want to watch the rest of that, you can probably go find that somewhere. But this idea is, can we use media to tell more compelling stories? Can we capture minds and hearts when we use media in more powerful ways than text? Here's one more. Actually, I shared this one earlier in the day, so those of you that saw this, just act surprised. This was a class with younger students, and they were talking about designing buildings of the future, and how buildings need to be ecologically friendly, and they need to have water that moves through them, and they need to have I don't know, photosynthesize or what, I don't even know what the class was teaching, but they were talking about making buildings more ecologically friendly, and the students drew this. And they knew that what they were drawing was kind of lame. They knew that didn't match this imagination that they had. These were like third graders. Like they knew what the buildings of the future looked like, and that wasn't it, right? But that was the best they could do with the artistic ability they had at the moment, okay? So the teacher said, well, let's use AI and see if we can do better. And so they saw a first building, they generated it, and like, that is not what we're talking about. It needs to have like waterfalls coming out the side. And they're like, all right, let's generate it again. Need more waterfalls, right? And they're like, no, it's like covered in grass all over the right. And so they generated it again. And after multiple generations, they finally came up with this. And the kid said, yes, that's what we're talking about here. And so it's this way to tell a compelling story that they weren't able to do before. Let me share one more example of this one, because this one really matters to me. It also allows us to tell new types of stories. So this is one of my favorite artists, Refik Anadol, and he takes large data and he turns the large data into images to help us conceptualize it better. And so these are these really powerful images, and so he basically takes huge data sets, so electrical brain activity from humans when reflecting on important memories, right? Hundreds of millions of data points, and then he gives that to an AI generator and says, based on that, hallucinate, right? Like we often talk about, we don't want hallucinations. He actually does the opposite. He says, hallucinate your heart out, AI. Doesn't have a heart. Hallucinate your processor out, AI, and come up with an image, a visual representation of this data. And you can see, here's an interesting one. This is a video of it. Here's, and the sound doesn't really matter for this, but you can see this one is actually data on glaciers. So you took 100 million data points from images of glaciers and said, AI, generate images of that data, not of the glaciers themselves. Those aren't little pictures it's of the connections in the connections of the data unit itself, of the data set. We've never been able, there's been no way to visualize a 100 million point data set before. And all of a sudden we have this really interesting way. He talks about this, by the way, as data as paint. He says, my paint is data. And I have a new way of actually expressing art. It's fascinating to think about when we can use AI to generate new types of data. All right. Let me do one more example, maybe two more, and then I want to have some time for some questions. Is that all right? We can talk a little bit about this. Good. I hope this is prompting some questions. We'll see how I do. So be ready. We'll talk about some things in a minute. All right. I want to talk about being a problem solver. I mentioned this one. I used to work for a company called IDEO. IDEO is a company that designs a lot of products. A bunch of products in your house are probably designed by IDEO. You don't know it because they're brand named by whatever company that you have it. But we would come in and they would come to us because we were really good at brainstorming. We were really good at thinking through solutions. And part of why they would pay us millions of dollars to do that is because humans stink at brainstorming. Now, don't be offended. I know it's hard to understand that. We worked for a long time at getting humans to brainstorm. We would try. We could do it. I have some pretty good tools in my tool belt. I can probably get people to brainstorm better than just about anybody. And it's still really hard. And the reason it's really hard is because we have something called lived experience. Lived experience makes us amazing. It makes us human. It allows us to make really good choices. What it also does is make us really stinky brainstormers, because it's hard for us to imagine something that we haven't lived or experienced. AI has no problem with that. Have you ever done this? AI, make me a cookie recipe. Great. Make me 4 more versions of it. Great. Make me 100 versions of it. Sure, here you go, 100 versions. Like, it'll just keep pumping out ideas. It'll go as wide as you want it, right? And so AI can be a very powerful tool in partnership with humans at solving problems. Right? The biggest challenge that we have with humans in solving problems is not exploring enough possible options before making a choice. And so AI can be a great partner. Here's the thing that we do. We actually do this with students. So we have students from all around the world that have to pick one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and talk about how they could use AI to actually help solve an important challenge. This is a cool one. This is one of the winning teams. They actually designed a hand. They 3D printed it, and it's a hand where you can talk to it, and then it will sign in sign language to somebody who's deaf. So this is an interesting example of using AI to help them be problem solvers. All right, last example, and then I promise we'll move on to conversation. Synthesizer. This is one that I really want to bring up, because one of the things that we have become very familiar with in our sports car world is accepting information that is at the wrong level for us. We've just become very accustomed to it because there was no other option, right? If I gave you something to read that you didn't understand, like as a teacher, I'm like, try harder. I don't know, like it's like we give really bad advice like that, right? Because what else did I do? As a teacher, I can't like rewrite it 30 times over. I can't retranslate it. I can't change it into a different format, but AI can. So here's an example of this. This is something from my kids' EPUS history class that I didn't read and wanted to be able to do it, but it's already beyond my level of understanding of US history. So here's what I did. I took it, threw it into AI and said, AI, give it to me, summarize it in 2 minutes and as a video and tell me what I need to know. And so here we go. Here's what I got. Maybe.
Hey, Richard. Let me give you a quick summary of this article. Before the conclusion of the 7 Years' War in 1763, the colonists in British North America were largely content with their status within the British Empire, benefiting from its imperial system with minimal cost.
Okay, I already don't understand that. And so I reprompted it. I said, this time let's do it again. This time, put it at about a 6th grade level. And could you make the person explaining it to me a little friendlier? Here's what I got.
Before the 7 Years' War ended in 1763, the American colonists liked being part of the British Empire because it was good for them and didn't cost much.
Okay, now we're talking. Now I understand, right? So this idea of leveling, of changing the level to the level that I need it at and changing the format to a format that's most relevant is a skill that will be required to thrive in the future AI world, in our future digital world, because it will allow us to be better at being human when we have access to information that has been held back from us because it's not leveled appropriately. And my level of that, there's nothing wrong with that information. If I was a history major, if I was there are certain cases where that would have been totally appropriate. For me, Richard, who is woefully inadequate in my history knowledge, that was not at a level that allowed me to be able to access it. This is also one more example. If anybody's played with Notebook LM, has anybody done that? Take anything, throw it in there and say, make a podcast for me. So I like to listen to podcasts when I walk around. So you could take that same article or anything else. I take my board meeting notes and throw it in there, and it'll say, hey, well, we're going to have this podcast today, and we're going to talk about these things that are in the notes. It's interesting to see that these 3 people really had concerns with this vote that came up, and it'll just talk it through like a podcast for me. I have been more prepared than any board member ever in the history of the world by having listened to the podcasts of the meeting notes before that other people haven't. So this idea of using data can be really powerful. All right, my point. This is the area where things get really cool. It's a really interesting space to think about how can we do human things better. We got to know what they are first. If we don't know what uniquely human skills are, none of what I'm talking about matters. If we can identify some skills, being better partners and friends, being more creative thinkers, being better problem solvers, being better learners, you fill those in. If we decide that those are things that are uniquely human, and we can recognize that if we can use AI in the appropriate ways, we can get much better at doing those things, we actually have a chance to make a pretty significant difference in the world. And I'll share this last chart and then we'll open up for questions. This is a Harvard study, and you can look at it if you want to dive into it. But basically what they did is they looked at a whole range of skills, and they asked humans to perform without any AI. It turns out that humans didn't do very well. Then they asked a team to perform these skills, and a team actually did quite a bit better. Teams actually perform better when they work on these skills. But then what's really fascinating is if you look at an individual with AI, doing these, understanding how to use AI in partnership, outperformed teams in significant ways and way outperformed humans trying to do the thing on their own, right? Because the humans were trying to haul rocks in that car that was never designed for hauling rocks, right? But when you compare the two and have the human ability, and then if you say AI and teams, it gets a little better too, but mostly it's that human understanding how to work in partnership with AI, bam, stuff starts to get really cool. So that's where I want to pause for the moment, and I want to turn it over to you. What thoughts and questions do you have? And I think there are some microphones, and one way in the back there, just to make sure somebody gets some exercise. If we can run up there. Yeah. He's coming. I want you to use the microphone because we have some people online, and I want them to be able to hear too. So, no rush, Dan. Just take your time.
Why don't you sit up front?
Okay, there you go.
I like sitting in the back. It's nice. So, through your presentation, you talked about 2 types of AI, machine learning and generative AI, which I consider to be very separate, and thus my question will only pertain to generative AI.
Okay.
So you said a lot about how AI can talk about synthesizing information, creating stuff, things like that. But what I like to point out is that we lose a lot when we outsource stuff to AI. For example, like brainstorming. If we outsource that to AI, we lose the ability to brainstorm, to think up stuff. We lose the ability to exercise those cognitive pathways. When we use AI to generate a portrait, to generate a story, we lose the ability to do that ourselves because we aren't walking through the process to create with intent. A lot of times, the process itself is what matters. That's what makes us human.
Yeah.
And I know you say, you came up with the example of the calculator, but this generative AI does our thinking for us. The calculator doesn't tell us, you have to use this t-test to compare these 2 means, and here are the degrees of freedom you have to use. You have to figure it out yourself and then plug that into the calculator. Yeah. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, really great question. Thank you. I think what you bring up is a really good point, which is we have to decide what are those skills that we don't want to lose. And this is a good point of debate, by the way. I don't pretend to have the answers to that. That is what we should be talking about. But let me just give you an example of a skill that I would be fine to lose, right? I would be fine to lose the skill of formatting in MLA style. So my son was a senior in high school, and last year he spent multiple class periods of his English class formatting his references in MLA style, learning how to do it, figuring out how to do it, then checking by the teacher. 3 or 4 class periods that could have been used for deeper learning about writing and about helping him find his voice, because we have a limited amount of time in school, and instead that was used on formatting in MLA style. I would be very happy to lose the ability to do that It is a terrible use of the human brain. It is loading rocks into a sports car to use the human brain's ability to format an MLA style. You will never, in any of your work, ever be asked to manually format an MLA style, right? You could debate that. You could say, no, actually, I think MLA style is an art form that we need to preserve, right? Okay, cool. But that's what we need to talk about. And when we agree on some things that we've been doing because we're the only game in town, not because it really helps us be better at being human, those are the things that we need to be brave enough to hand off to AI because they actually don't matter for our ability to be human. But man, creativity, whew, that's one that matters. We better hold on to creativity. I feel like I am a far more creative person when I get to use AI than not. But that depends on how I'm using AI, and it also depends on in what ways I'm being creative. But that's the conversation I want to be having. So thank you for asking such a great question. Yes, I think we have one right here. And so I'm going to chuck a mic right here, and you just catch it. No, I'm just kidding. He's coming right there with the mic. Yeah, we have people online, so I want to make sure that they hear it. Just pass the mic on down. Yeah. I'm not hearing it. Can we? All right, just talk loudly. Remember, I'll repeat the question for the people online.
All right, looks like, okay. So I was missing
there we
that
go.
part. All right, there we go. All right, could you just spend a moment, something I'm still not getting. What is the source of AI? I mean, who is it? What is it? I still don't understand that.
Sure. So there are people who could give a much more technical definition. Who was it in our class earlier today that was like, it's all the stuff in the internet that's helping create more stuff? Who said that? Was somebody here who said that? It was brilliant. It was actually one of the best explanations of AI I've ever heard, right? It's all the stuff, all the digital stuff we have that is being used as a source to create more stuff, new stuff, right? Now, there's very technical ways that we could talk about how that happens. AI consumes huge amounts of data from everything that we feed into it, and it looks for patterns in that data. And it also uses what's called large language models to be able to understand the intent behind questions, to then know what patterns to look for, right? But at the end of the day, it is really just a huge amount of data that is then used as a base for computers to look for patterns and then generate new types of information. So I think if we think about this, I will share, maybe this is not the question you totally asked, but I want to share this a little bit. I think we think a lot about the source of the data being what really matters for how AI is going to be used, right? We talked earlier in class today about this idea of bias. And there's bias in the answers we get from AI. Oh my gosh, bias in the answers from AI? There's bias in every answer we get from everybody. There's way more bias that I get from my Aunt Joan than there is from Gemini, right? Like, the bias exists everywhere. There's bias in the answer. What is far more determining factor on the quality of the responses that we get is not the quality of the data, although the data matters. I'm not letting any of the companies off the hook. We beat them up all the time to get better data. It's far more about the prompts that we ask, right? So when I ask it a prompt, if I ask a prompt, and I shared this before, I said, don't ever accept one answer from AI. I think the example that we used earlier today was, hey, AI, what's the right way to handle immigration policy, right? What's it going to give me? I don't know. We should try it. Let's find out. So here's what we're going to do. Oh, I can't see. Let me see if they'll pull. I'm tethering from my phone, so we're going to see if this actually works. But we're going to go here. Can you see that okay? Sorry, it's in Spanish. I speak Spanish, so my computer's set to Spanish. But like, what is the answer in the US? Okay, there we go. So it's going to go through and it's going to think about it. And we'll see what answer it gives me. Oh, it's not connected. Sorry, you guys. This was almost cool. I'm going to try one more thing, see if I can get connect to my phone. And if I can, we're great. And if not, I will just make up an answer from AI and we'll pretend it's working. Okay, let's see if that got it. Should be kind of fun. There we go. Oh, all right. I'm going to just do here. Let's just do this. What's the best color? Hey, hang on. This is a better one. Food. Dell's lemonade. What's the best food? Okay. And we're going to see what it says here. It's thinking about options, food preferences, right? There's no single best food. Oh, I was hoping it would just say like pizza, right? But this is interesting. It gives a good answer. But here's the point I want to make. It's okay. It says depends. It might be their childhood favorite. Like, okay, great. But here's my point is, I'm going to push it. I'm never going to accept one answer. I'm going to push it to ask something else. I was actually hoping it would give me a bad answer, but it actually gave a pretty good one. Okay? How might you answer that question if you lived in Mexico, where my wife and I used to live? Okay, it's thinking. Okay, how funny, you even gave me a little joke. Aye, that's impossible to answer. Okay, cute. But it goes through and it talks about different foods from different regions, right? And then I could say, all right, what if I was a vegan? Do you see my point here is that it's not the quality of the data is there. It's the quality of the questions we're asking that are going to get us really interesting results. And so if we'd done that immigration policy one, the one that I was saying before, it'd give one answer. And then if I said, well, what if I lived in Texas? How might I feel differently about immigration, right? Or one of my favorite ones, what if I was an alien from another planet that had never set foot on the Earth? How might I think about immigration? Like, it will give a really interesting answer to that question that will give very different viewpoints. And so when it comes to that data, if we want to really help expand our thinking, it's far more about the prompts that we're using than it is about the data sets. The data sets are there, it's just how we're choosing to pull them out. I answered like 4 questions that you didn't ask. Hopefully that helped a little bit. I'm happy to also dive deeper into the mechanics of how AI works. And you can also just go online. You can just do a quick like how AI works and it'll show you like how it processes stuff. But I think the far more important skill is how are we using it to pull out the data that we're looking for.
So we could go on for hours tonight.
We can't? I thought that's what we were going to do.
We are over time and beyond our time. Thank you all very much. We do have a couple of copies of...
Before you close. I mean, go back here. I know. Here we go. I have to end with a final picture here. So let me get this back. Here, let's go like this. I spent all this time making one more AI image for you, so I'm going to show it. Dang it, and then we'll go out and hang out. Okay. So my point, as I wrap up here, is this world that we're in order to thrive in this world, we need to be able to understand this relationship between AI and human skills, and know and truly know which is right for which tool. And if we get it right, I'm really excited about the future. And if we get it wrong, I'm a little scared about what the future might bring. And so I want to end with an invitation, if I can, and that is to be brave enough to hold on to tasks that are uniquely human, to be humble enough to hand off tasks that we were never really good at and only did them because we were the only option, and to be responsible enough to use AI to help us be better at being human. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Richard, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next Tuesday. And like I said, we have a couple of Richard's books out on the front for you to grab on your way out. Have a great night. Drive safe.